Alright guys, we are going to go through our Chapter 3, Section 1 notes. This is going over the same information as your guided reading notes, and we're going to add a couple other features to talk about that cover the whole section, but it's going over the chemical compounds in cells. So you should have made a copy of your 3.1 notes for today. And the PowerPoint slides are available as well if you want to just do that, or you can watch this video to fill in your notes, and you can pause the video as you need to type in the notes. If you're ready, we are going to get started. So, the first thing we're going to talk about are elements and compounds. You've already had a couple warm-ups about these and going over what they are and how they're set up. So you may not realize it, but the air is a mixture of gases, and there are elements and compounds like floating all around in the air that we breathe in and we exhale. Trees produce oxygen for us, and that is an element, and so it's all around us. The gases in the air include elements and compounds, and the three main gases in the air are oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide. So oxygen and nitrogen are examples of elements. They are any substance that cannot be broken down into simpler substances, and then the smallest unit of an element is called an atom. So oxygen and nitrogen exist by themselves. That is what it is. They can combine with other things, but when they're by themselves, it's just an oxygen element or a nitrogen element. So elements, this kind of picture just kind of shows you, are single atoms or molecules, and then compounds are when you combine those elements. So compounds then, the gas carbon dioxide is a compound because it's made up of the elements carbon and oxygen. So you're putting them together, you're combining them. So when two or more elements combine chemically, they form a compound. And then most elements in living things, so like us, actually occur in the form of compounds. Usually it's some sort of combination of elements that create that compound. And then the smallest unit of any compound is called a molecule. So that's just like the basic structure of that compound. So the molecule of carbon dioxide is one carbon atom and two oxygen atoms. Most chemical reactions then within a cell could not take place without water, and water is considered a compound as well. So water helps cells keep their size and shape, and then many compounds in living things also contain the element carbon, and most compounds that contain carbon are called organic compounds because they have that carbon element which is found in living things. And then compounds that don't contain carbon are called inorganic compounds. Water and sodium chloride, which is the fancy scientific name for table salt, they are both considered inorganic compounds. So water has hydrogen and oxygen elements, and then table salt is sodium and chlorine. So getting into the chemical compounds in cells or in living things, these are the important compounds that we need to be able to function and make up a lot of things in our body. So a carbohydrate is an energy-rich organic compound made of the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So those three elements are chemically combined and then create this carbohydrate. Examples are sugars and starches. So like potatoes, pasta, bread, those are all starches. And then any sugary food is considered a carbohydrate. Then carbohydrates are important because they create some of the cell parts. So, like cellulose in the cell walls is a type of carbohydrate, and carbohydrates are also found in cell membranes. So, again, your example fruits are very loaded with sugar and carbohydrates. Pastas, breads, grains, things like that. Those are all carbohydrates as well. The next type of organic compound in living things is lipids. And again, these are another form of energy rich organic compounds, also made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So they're similar to carbohydrates in that way, but lipids contain even more energy than carbohydrates. And lipids are used, cells store energy in lipids so they can use them for a later use or use them as a longer source of energy. So if you know about bears hibernating, they start to like eat a ton of food and they get really, really big. And then they go into hibernation. And all of that stored energy in the fat that they have gained from eating, their body can use to continue to um, function. Even when they are like hibernating and sleeping, their cells still need to be functioning so they can breathe and process the fluids in their body and things like that. So the cells take that energy from the fats and the lipids. And then cell membranes are also mainly made of lipids. So your oils, butter, fats, anything like that is going to be a lipid. You can think of like blubber in seals as well. Then proteins are another inorganic compound molecule that's made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and then it also includes nitrogen, and some proteins even include sulfur. So protein rich foods, foods that are high in protein, include meat, eggs, fish, nuts, beans, anything like that. And proteins give you energy as well and kind of fill you up and make you feel full. So protein molecules are made up of smaller molecules called amino acids, and there are only 20 common amino acids, but cells use these and they combine them in different ways to form thousands of different proteins. And then those proteins have specific functions and directions for how they're used and what they need to do. Okay, so your example, and then these are the common 20 amino acids. And then, like I said, you can, cells combine these all and form all different types of proteins. Um, these are the 20 common ones. The chart does say that there are over 500 amino acids found in nature, but when it comes to humans and our genetic code and DNA, we only use 20 essential amino acids. So again, with proteins, much of the structure of cells is actually made up of proteins. And there's another type of protein known as an enzyme, which performs the function in chemical reactions. And this is a type of protein that kind of helps speed up the chemical reaction in living things. So when you add an enzyme, um, it helps get that reaction started or it speeds it up so that it can happen quickly and the cell can do what it needs to. The fourth type of necessary or important organic compound is a nucleic acid. And these are also very long organic molecules that are made up of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. They include nitrogen like a protein does, but then they also include phosphorus. And so nucleic acids are what contain the instructions that cells need to carry out all the functions of life. They are where we get like our genetic information. And then the types of nucleic acids, this is just an example, but the types of nucleic acid are deoxyribonucleic acid or DNA, which is our genetic material that gives all our cells the information about the organism. And this is what's passed from parents to offspring. So you get some of your parents, like DNA and genetic material, and some of their genes and information. And then whenever like you would have kids down the road, you would pass on some of your genetic information as well to them. And then the second one is ribonucleic acid or RNA, and this helps in the role of producing proteins. So RNA is found throughout the cytoplasm in cells, so that gel-like fluid, if you remember, where organelles can kind of float around, RNA can float around in it as well. And then you also find RNA in the nucleus as part of the production of proteins and where you can find that. So this picture just kind of represents what an RNA and a DNA strand looks like. DNA strands are two, they call them double helix, and then RNA is just kind of one of those strands. And then if you see these different bases, the nitrogenous bases, DNA is made up of cytosine, guanine, adenine, and thymine, and then they pair together, whereas RNA is made up of cytosine, guanine, adenine, and then uracil. Okay, so this is the end of your notes. They were nice and sweet today. But once you are done with these notes, you will be going back to Schoology. And in today's folder, you're going to be completing the DNA versus RNA Ed puzzle. It's going to talk about this and how it's set up a little bit more, and talk about the base pairs and what DNA and RNA do for us. Have a good day, guys.